as for future Little Big Planet retrospectives, there is technically one more game I have left to talk about. Yeah, so, about that. I've teased this video more times than I can count, but I think I'm ready. I think I'm ready to tackle the final Little Big Planet game in this retrospective series, Little Big Planet Karting, a PS3 game that came out at the tail end of the console's life cycle. And looking back, that was a pretty wild era, man. It's almost like Sony was pushing out as many games as possible before the PS4 hit store shelves. From 2012 to 2013, we were getting game after game. There was a new Twisted Metal, Sly Cooper 4, the first Last of Us game, and who could forget PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. A game I can probably ramble on about for hours on end, but I'll save that for another time. Little Big Planet was also quickly becoming one of Sony's most consistently active franchises, with just how many games were being pumped out each year. I mean, look at the release schedule. LBP2 came out in 2011, LBP Vita in 2012, and not even 2 months after that, Little Big Planet Karting released in November of that year. An LBP kart racing spin-off that certainly seemed like a knockout success on paper, especially with how much recognition and praise the mainline series was getting at the time. But success is not the word I would use to describe LBP Karting. From low sales to mixed reviews, Karting was kind of a letdown for both fans and PlayStation alike. Even still, I'll always have a soft spot for this game. I wouldn't call myself Karting's #1 defender though. It does have its problems, but I don't think it's a bad game. It had some serious potential to be something bigger than what it was, but sadly it just never really took off. Before I delve a bit deeper into this LBP spin-off, we have to acknowledge its predecessor, because without it, an LBP kart racer might not have existed in the first place.
Dear PlayStation, I'm going against Steve on this Mod Nation Racers track I made. He's pretty good.
Man up, Twitchy. This is your house. You created this track, made these shortcuts. The whole PlayStation Network's scared of your squish block things.
Yeah.
This track's a part of you, like an undersized jockstrap.
Yeah!
Some Steve's gonna defile it like a junkyard sofa? Wrong! Wrong is so right, it's wrong, right?
I think so.
No, you know so.
Mod Nation Racers, rated E for everyone.
Enter Mod Nation Racers, a kart racer released for both the PS3 and PSP in May of 2010. It was developed by the Canadian studio United Front Games, alongside Sony's own San Diego studio. San Diego Studio was already an established developer, primarily known for their work on NBA games and MLB The Show. United Front Games, on the other hand, didn't have a single game under their belt yet, meaning that Mod Nation Racers was their first official release as a studio. And while it didn't break any records, the game's reception was fairly positive when it came out. Sure, there were numerous comparisons to Mario Kart, but what really made this game stand out was its focus on user-generated content. It was still a kart racer at its core, with power-ups and goofy little characters you could drive as, but you could also create and share your own custom avatars, karts, and most importantly, racetracks. If anything, it was a lot more like Little Big Planet, and I think it's safe to say that LBP was definitely a direct inspiration for it. Sony practically marketed both games together, with Mod Nation being labeled as the next game in the Create, Play, and Share series, a tagline that was only really associated with the LBP series. The developers at United Front also seemingly had a good relationship with Media Molecule, to the point where a Sackboy skin and kart was bundled with launch copies of Mod Nation Racers. They did a couple of things outside of Mod Nation though. UFG would later go on to make Sleeping Dogs in 2012, while acting as a support studio on titles such as Tomb Raider, Halo the Master Chief Collection, and Disney Infinity. After failing to find much financial success though, the studio would close down in late 2016, causing them to cancel all of their upcoming projects. But just a few years before their closure, UFG did manage to put out one last game. Little Big Planet Karting released on November 6th, 2012, and it was the last game primarily developed by United Front Games. Leading up to its release, I remember being extremely excited for it. I mean, Little Big Planet took over my entire life around this time, so when you tell me that there's going to be an LBP kart racer where I can make and play endless amounts of custom tracks, I was sold. I needed this game day one. I remember rewatching the trailers on YouTube and IGN's website, patiently waiting for the game's release. I even ended up securing a code to participate in the game's private beta by signing up to a mailing list. That's also how I ended up getting my LBP beta vest, which, as a kid, was arguably just as exciting as the game for me. But before karting came to be, UFG was planning to develop a console sequel to the first ModNation Racers game. However, something fell through behind the scenes, and ModNation 2 got turned into an LBP kart racer. So if you ever thought that these games felt similar to each other, it's because karting is technically a sequel to ModNation in disguise. A lot of assets and mechanics that were being worked on for ModNation 2 can even be seen in early builds of LBPK. In comparison to ModNation though, LBPK was a much slower paced game and doesn't carry over some of ModNation's mechanics, such as the boost meter. On the bright side, LBPK had a much more robust track editor, allowing you to make much more than just race tracks and battle tracks, essentially being a platform for games much like how LBP2 was advertised. In karting, you can make shoot-'em-up styled boss fights, top-down RC car levels, race tracks in a 2D or first-person perspective, and so much more. For being an LBP spin-off with very little input from Media Molecule, I feel like UFG and San Diego Studio really nailed that quintessential LBP charm, which kinda seems to be a trend for these LBP side games. The pod, customization, and most importantly, music are all totally on point for this series. The new original songs are pretty good, but the licensed tracks are where they really cooked. Tracks like 10 Cities Beyond, Fresh, Happy Birthday Party, and of course, the remix of Airbrushed from Anamanaguchi are near the top for me when it comes to LBP music. They even added another song from Kinky, who featured in LBP1 with the iconic Canyon song Corn Man. The game's graphics also looked pretty decent for a PS3 game. I know it's probably just the lighting engine doing most of the heavy lifting, but I don't care. 12 years later, and I'm still impressed at how good this game looks sometimes. Another notable feature with LBP Karting is that it carried over all of the DLC costumes you purchased from LBP1 and LBP2. The only DLC that wasn't cross-buy was obviously the level packs.
Earlier today, a race broke out between 4 crazy karts. Reports suggest no dinosaurs have been harmed, although we can confirm a donut did sustain some damage. All drivers are thought to be armed and slightly ridiculous. Gamers at home are being advised to customize their karts, drive any track, and race the unexpected with LittleBigPlanet Karting, only for PlayStation 3.
The gameplay in LBPK is pretty simple and easy to understand. The moment you boot up the game, you're greeted with a tutorial that teaches you the basics and presents you with 2 different control options. You can choose to accelerate with the X button or the R2 trigger. If you choose X, you can drift with the R1 bumper, and if you choose R2, you can drift with the X button. Drifting, much like most kart racers, gives you an extra boost depending on how long you hold it. And also like other kart racers, LBPK features items you can pick up to add a bit of randomness to each race. The items in this game come in the form of the Weaponator, a weapon pickup that grants the player a random attack or defense item, most of which are direct references to the mainline LBP games. I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but some of the weapons you can get include the Paintinator, which stuns enemy players when hit, the Boxing Glove, which is essentially this game's bullet bill, and the somewhat busted Fast Forward item that straight up teleports you to where most of the players are. There's also a variety of different missiles and mines you can get as well. The coolest part about the Weaponator though is the fact that you can customize the way these items look when creating your own levels. When I played this game as a kid, I remember people used to recreate a lot of Mario Kart items, such as the red and green shells, banana peels, and even the item boxes themselves. And if you couldn't guess, pretty much everything about this game was customizable. Not just the tracks or the Weaponator, but your Sackboy, your pod, and even the karts can all be customized to your liking, albeit with some limitations. Your Sackboy can be customized the same way you can in any other mainline LBP games. There's loads of different costume pieces and stickers you can unlock throughout the game, and as I mentioned earlier, the DLC you purchase from LBP are all carried over here. One of the only real downsides for Sackboy customization is the fact that stickering in LBP karting is pretty terrible. Compared to the actual LBP games, it's really hard to place stickers exactly where you want them. When it comes to the kart customization in LBPK, none of it actually affects gameplay, as all karts and wheels have the same exact stats to one another. Even if they look drastically different, it's all the same. This is where I could see people being let down a lot, because not having any stats to wheels and carts kinda negates a lot of strategizing. But at the same time, who knows if United Front Games would have implemented balance changes to prevent the most dominant kart builds from winning every race. I know that was an issue in Mario Kart 8 for a while, where every single person online was using Waluigi on the Wiggler. At the end of the day, they went for the more casual approach, and the only real strategizing in this game mainly comes from how you utilize your items and drift boosts. That being said, there are a few more gameplay mechanics I haven't touched on just yet. Those would be the grappling hook, stunts, and of course slapping, because you can't have an LBP game without slapping. The grappling hook from LBP 2 Returns is a very small mechanic in certain parts of a course. Some racetracks will have sections where you'll be prompted to use your grappling hook to latch onto grabbable sponges. This is karting's way of implementing a sort of platforming element, and it can be used as a way to access shortcuts within certain racetracks. Stunts are another mechanic in this game and are probably going to be your best bet in pulling ahead in certain courses. Stunts can be performed only when your kart is in the air. By using the right stick, you can spin your car around, and depending on how many 360-degree rotations you do, the greater the boost you get when landing back down. You can also use stunts in tandem with the grappling hook after using it, or after using a boost ramp. You just gotta make sure you're facing the right direction when you land, because one bad stunt can cost you the whole race. But last but not least is the slap mechanic. If you're neck to neck with another player, simply flick the right stick to slap them and cause them to slow down for a brief period. That pretty much covers how the game plays. Now, how does the game feel? Well, as I said before, karting always felt a bit slower compared to ModNation Racers, and I was never a big fan of that. But it's not only just slower, the racing in this game also felt floatier, much like the actual LBP games. ModNation was a much more responsive and tight controlling racing game, and I feel like LittleBigPlanet Karting did not need to be as floaty as it is. I don't know if they were trying to replicate the feel of LBP, but I don't know. Giving this game ModNation's tight controls could have honestly benefited this game a lot. And I know they were trying to make the games feel different, but that's one thing karting should have definitely taken from ModNation, if anything. It also doesn't help that karting is a game that targets 30 FPS, which isn't really the best when it comes to racing games. I know some people aren't as sensitive to lower FPS in games, but if you play any other kart racer that runs at a stable 60 and go back to LBPK, it's a night and day difference. I know it's never going to happen, but karting is a game I would love to see get a modern remaster. Not just for the FPS increase, but maybe to tighten up the controls a little bit too.
The kart is running great, kid, and Tony and Level Creations got something special for you, Tone. One of these! Okay! I fix the karts, you drive the karts, and people like Tony and the online community can use the Level Creator to dream up, create, and share new tracks every day. Straight out of their heads and into your tank.
Fueled by imagination.
Go get 'em, kid.
The main appeal of LBP Karting, much like ModNation, was naturally the online aspect. Sharing your own custom tracks and playing the limitless amounts of community-made courses was the main appeal of these games. Damn it! Okay, fine, look, the servers might have shut down for karting in ModNation years ago, but that's not going to stop me, because I've actually had the opportunity to play LBP Karting online for the past year or so. I've been able to playtest an upcoming custom server for the game alongside some other people. The server is primarily being developed for ModNation Racers first and foremost, but since karting and ModNation are essentially the same game, this server just kinda works for both of them. But for the purpose of this video, I'm only going to focus on talking about my karting experience. I also want to make it clear that I only know the person who's making the server itself. I have no affiliation with the group that will be hosting it. In fact, I don't even know who's going to be hosting it. I just know that this server is being made to be eventually hosted by a group of people. But whenever it does go public, I'll be sure to make a follow-up video, maybe just playing some courses with friends on both games. With this being an unfinished private server purely for testing purposes, there are still issues that need to be ironed out. That means my experience with Karting's Online isn't going to be 100% accurate to how it was back in the day. Don't get me wrong though, it's pretty damn close. Since the official LBPK servers were properly archived, we were able to play on a ton of custom tracks, and I gotta say, there were some decent tracks here, some that I've never really played before. I always thought LBPK had a weak lineup of custom tracks to play because the cool pages back then never properly updated to show new and trending levels. The cool pages were just broken, I guess. There ended up being a lot of courses here you would expect, such as Mario Kart and Crash Team Racing recreations, and those are always fun, but there were plenty of original tracks as well. well. Some of my favorites were actually some of the battle tracks, because battle tracks are where people took the opportunity to change up the gameplay. For example, there's this one level called LB Park, and the entire track is just you driving around a functional amusement park. You can ride bumper cars, Ferris wheels, and even roller coasters. It's really neat, and it's a fun little hangout course to play with friends. It's actually a level I remember playing when the game first came out, so it was nice to actually experience it again. Another battle track I liked a lot was this one where you battled underwater using custom submarines. And yeah, I almost forgot to mention, LBPK lets you make custom level specific vehicles for people to drive, and somehow people found a way to make a submarine battle map with that. I uploaded about 75 archived tracks onto the server, and we played through quite a bit of them. Not all of them were super high quality, but every now and then we'd play in something insane, like a Star Wars pod racing track, or this cool South Park track with a custom Kenny power-up. Some of the people I tested with also made their own original tracks to play on. And when I was scrolling through the cool pages, seeing all these new levels I never played before, it really felt like I was playing LBP Karting online with an active community again. That isn't to say that my experience was entirely perfect. There's a few issues I ran into with these custom servers that might get fixed in the future, but I'm not really sure. One of the biggest issues is the fact that joining other people's pods is completely broken. So the only way I was able to play with other people is if I loaded up a track and had people join me through the quick play option. I did play on both actual PS3 hardware and on PC through the RPCS3 emulator. And from my experience, playing in the PS3 was a lot better than playing on PC. Depending on how much was going on in the tracks, I experienced some significant frame drops on emulator. From what I understand, it's an RPCS3 issue. Hopefully the game gets more stability updates on RPCS3, because at this current moment, I'm probably just going to stick with official hardware. Speaking of which, players on RPCS3 and PS3 can actually cross-play with each other, so if you have friends on PS3 that don't want to play an emulator, you can still play with them even if you're on PC. I would be more than happy to continue talking about my experience with karting online, but I think I'll wait until the server is actually finished and released before I do so. But for now, let's move on to the actual creation aspect of karting.
I remember calling some friends of mine and saying, dude, I just got this game. This is crazy. You cannot believe what you can actually do with this. They actually made the game and they gave you the tools that they used to make the game, and you can do it yourself. And from there, just completely hooked. It has to be the best game that I've ever played.
Now, if you know anything about me, you'd know that I'm not much of a creator in these UGC games. I made some levels in LBP, but a majority of my time was spent playing other people's creations, not making them. As for LBPK's create mode, I don't think I spent more than 5 minutes making something in this game. So, I'm just gonna bring in someone who's more familiar with LBP Karting's track editor. If you watched my LBP refresh videos, you should recognize his voice.
Hey guys, it's me, John Furlow, and I'm not gonna lie, don't tell Victini I said this, but I'm not very good at creating an LBP at all. I kind of lied about that to get in this video, because I just love LittleBigPlanet Karting. It's actually my favorite kart racer ever in the history of mankind, and apart from the looks, it's very different from any LBP game, and the create mode is very different as well. Unlike other LBP games, the create mode is actually a full 3D space, and it's the closest thing we have to a fully 3D LittleBigPlanet create mode. It also takes a lot from the Mod Nation Racers create mode, which makes sense since this game was supposed to be Mod Nation Racers 2, and to be honest, a lot of it is just Mod Nation create mode presented with the LBP HUD, but that's not to say it didn't have its own unique LBP things aside from the HUD. The create mode had different backgrounds like the other LBP games. It had LBP tools and objects. It had some logic. You could customize the power-ups and the little boxes the power-ups came in. You could customize the entire HUD, and you can even create custom little carts. Like this level had you in a boat, but there were limitations. There was no co-op creation, so unlike the other LBP games, you couldn't bring your friends into create mode. You couldn't make your own music like in LBP2. You had to use the music the prize bubbles gave you. Overall, even though if it is a full 3D space, it doesn't necessarily mean it's better than the normal LBP create mode. Don't get me wrong, this create mode is very different and it's really cool, but compared to the other create modes, you can't really do a whole lot in this one. At least from what I've seen, this create mode is not groundbreaking at all. But compared to Mod Nation Racers, there's more stuff you can do. Like in Mod Nation Racers, you can't really make a whole Mario Kart track with Mario Kart items. I feel like in comparison to Mod Nation's create mode, it's kind of an upgrade. It's kind of an upgrade. Like, there is some stuff missing. There was a feature in Mod Nation where you can get the game to populate the track for you, like add trees and decorations and all that. That feature just isn't in this game. There were specific kind of traps and hazards in Mod Nation, which were switched out for more LBP styled hazards and traps. So it's kind of whatever you prefer on that one. So it is just weird to me, because the LBP karting create mode, even with it being a full 3D space to create, it feels more limited compared to the other LBP games. Even if you have a bigger space to work with, it is just an odd addition. They could have gone the Saba route and just not made a create mode, but they did it anyway, even if it is just a reskin of Mod Nation Racers create mode. It's still a really cool thing, and literally nobody talks about it. Like hell, Victini didn't even want to talk about it, dude. He got me to do it. But it is still really cool, and nobody talks about it, and it doesn't help that nobody even talks about this game. But I think I am done rambling. I think I said what needs to be said. Thank you for letting me on, Victini, and back to you.
One last aspect of LBP Karting that I haven't gone over yet is the game's story mode. The plot this time around involves a new group of antagonists called the Horde. A group of greedy hoarders that have been stealing stuff from all over Craft World. It's up to Sackboy and his newly acquired Kart to stop the Horde and bring everything back to its rightful place. The campaign consists of about 25 different racetracks, but that's not the only content here, as the mode also features a variety of side levels, including battle arenas, mini games, and even boss fights. All tracks are spread across 7 distinct worlds, and there's a mix of both brand new locations and even old locations from past LBP games. The very first world in story mode is quite literally called LittleBigPlanet, and includes courses based on the gardens, wedding, and canyons themes from LBP 1. Victoria's Laboratory and Eve's Asylum also make a return from LBP 2 as full-blown worlds. And the brand new worlds are Monster Islands, Progress Emporium, and the Space Base. These 3 might seem entirely new at first glance, but they do seem to link back to past LBP games as well. Monster Islands has a Japanese Zen garden aesthetic, much like the Islands theme from LBP 1. Progress Emporium, the retro futurism theme, almost perfectly mirrors Factory of a Better Tomorrow in a lot of ways. And Space Base, a nightclub spaceship, is canonically located right above Avalonia. Outside of those 6, there is technically one more world, but I'll get into that a bit later, as I want to briefly go over this game's story characters. Each world has their own creator-curator, and unlike how LBP 2 had walking, talking sackbots as its story characters, United Front Games decided to bring back the classic cardboard cutout character type from LBP 1 and PSP. That means curators that were previously sackbots, such as Victoria and Eve, aren't present for their own story worlds. This time around, Victoria's lab has Vernon the Lab Rat, and Eve's Asylum features a character named Venus the Flytrap. But hey, at least the LittleBigPlanet themed world brought back the Queen, along with cameos of other LBP 1 characters. The brand new curators I haven't mentioned yet include Ray the Wonder Turtle from Monster Islands, Don Doubtworthy from Progress Emporium, and Captain Sirius Oculus from the Space Base. And I know this is going to be a bit controversial to some, but I don't really care much for most of these characters, especially compared to the Alliance in LBP 2. I think some of them are neat, like Don Doubtworthy, who's this sketchy but otherwise friendly businessman, or Sirius Oculus, this funky space captain that also happens to be good friends with Avalon Centrifuge. Everyone else though, like Vernon, Venus, and Ray, all seem to be pretty forgettable to me. That's not too big of a deal though, as the characters are not the main focus here. It's how good the racetracks play and how interesting the themes are. And just about every racetrack in this game is fun to play on. They're all pretty well designed and do their job to showcase what players can achieve using the game's level editor. And at the end of the day, that's pretty much what all LittleBigPlanet stories are meant to do. But going back to the last world I didn't talk about, Horde Sweet Horde is the final story world, and it only contains a single level. A boss fight level where you face off against LBPK's true main antagonist, the Trash Monster. The Trash Monster's creation is a direct consequence of the Horde's greed, and it's made up of all of the items that they stole throughout the game. The fight itself has 2 different phases, with the first having you battle a bunch of trash minions by using the Weaponator. The second and last phase is a bit more involved. You have to focus on avoiding the monster's searchlights while also shooting lob bombs at his 3 weak point thrusters. If you end up getting caught by one of the searchlights, he'll start shooting homing missiles at you, which is almost a guaranteed death. The game is pretty generous though, giving you a total of 8 lives for some extra insurance. After beating the boss, the trash monster explodes, restoring all of the stolen items back to where they came from. The Horde end up realizing what they did was wrong, and Stephen Fry gives one last touching speech.
Has our sack hero's defiance made the Horde realize that to take without giving is a hollow pursuit? That to create and share, the very ethos of Little Big Planet, is cast in wool and is exactly how one should live a worthy life. So clean out your clutter, you reformed hoarders. Rebuild your craft world in whatever way you see fit. Let imagination be your stallion, and its eclectic clip-clopping leave trails of wonderment in its wake. Not that you could fit a horse in a cart that size. It was a metaphor. I just meant to be imaginative. Do not try and stuff a horse in that cart. I'm serious. Remember the dog in the envelope incident? Learn from that. Yeah.
Believe it or not, I never actually beat this campaign when I was younger. It wasn't until 2021 where I decided to livestream myself going back to beat karting for the first time. Something I wanted to do to help prepare for this very video. A video I would end up making in 2025. There's not much else I could really go over when it comes to LBP karting. I know there were some DLC karts for the game, but nothing crazy like a track expansion pack. It did have the cross-buy stuff with LBP 1 and 2, but that was really it. When karting released, I always had a feeling that the game wouldn't last very long. The cool pages were broken day 1, there were barely any players in the first couple of months, and UFG didn't do any meaningful updates. The studio would shut down in 2016, and 2 years later, the online servers for both karting and ModNation Racers would shut down as well. I do find it ironic that LittleBigPlanet paved the way for ModNation to exist, while ModNation created LBP Karting, and karting brought an end to both the studio that made it and the series that preceded it. I'm not sure if there's much of a future for either of these games, considering the main developer is gone, but we'll at least have custom servers to look forward to in the near future. Despite its obvious flaws, I always saw karting as a pretty cool LBP spin-off. ModNation is probably the better racing game, but I can still appreciate them both for different reasons. This might be my final LittleBigPlanet retrospective, but it's definitely not the end for this channel. I have so many more videos I've been wanting to make, and now that I've covered the LBP series in its entirety, I feel more motivated to do whatever I want now. That isn't to say that LittleBigPlanet-centric content isn't going away, because while I might be doing other things, there's still LBP videos I've been wanting to make for a while. I know the series is effectively dead and all, but it was the main focus of this channel for years. I'm not just gonna drop it. As for my next video, I might take a closer look at the ModNation Racers series. Let me know what you think about that in the comments. I don't think it's going to be a super lengthy retrospective like this video, but I'll figure something out. Before I end things off, I just want to say thank you for 50,000 subscribers. Seriously. I never expected to get this far, but here we are, halfway to 100K, which is my absolute dream goal on YouTube. I don't know if we'll hit it anytime soon, if ever, but at this rate, who knows. But I poured way more time into this karting video, more than I have on any other LBP retrospective on the channel. So if you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate it if you leave a like, and subscribe if you haven't. It would mean a lot. Thanks for watching though. I'll see you guys next time.
More videos coming soon.